All right, just going to give everyone a moment to settle in here, make sure their audio is working before I go over some technical details. Welcome to today's webinar. All right, so while more people start filing in, I'll make sure I type this out just for people coming in a little bit later, but this is Zoom webinar. By now you've probably joined us for one of these, but just in case you haven't, it is not like a normal Zoom meeting. Your microphones and your cameras are disabled by default, so you don't have to worry about interrupting us. We're not going to use the hand raise feature today. So if you use that, I will reach out to you privately to see if there's an issue you have, but otherwise, in terms of interaction, the main things you'll want to focus on are the Q&A feature and the chat feature. If you have any question related to the content, any question for the panelists, please use the Q&A feature. It makes it a lot easier for us to manage the questions, make sure we get to all of them in due order. You can upvote questions, you can view other questions that have been asked, and you can add your own comments to them. If you have any kind of technical issues or just comments that you want to have, use the chat feature. When you click on that, just make sure you select all panelists and attendees if you want everyone to see your comment. So that's the gist of the interaction. And with that, I'll hand it off to Wendy Kilgore.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. I appreciate you joining us today for a discussion on the Academic Records and Transcripts, a practice guide with COVID-19 context. Sorry, I had a bit of a challenge there advancing my slides. Sorry about that. Today's discussion, we're going to share a bit about our research results and also have two experts in the field who are also co-authors of the book, join us as panelists. So we're going to do a little moderated Q&A after we talk about some of the data. And so we have myself, I'm the Director of Research at ACRO, and joining us today is Nora McLaughlin, who's the Registrar at Reed College, and Sue Hamilton at Rutgers, University Assistant Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs. And both of them are long-term ACRO members and have co-authored the book a number of times and presented on the subject as well. So they'll have a lot to share with you. A little bit of housekeeping. Participants will be muted. As Mike shared, we'd like you to ask the questions in the Q&A tab, and we will attempt to answer all the questions at about the 45-minute mark over there after the moderated questions. And we will also record the webinar and post it on the ACRO website. Sue, Nora, and I would like to get an idea of who's listening today so we can adjust possibly what we're talking about, because we're going to talk about academic records and transcripts as a field of expertise and leadership. So if you take a moment, please, to answer this poll that has just popped up on your screen, that'll give us an idea and help shape possibly how much time we're going to talk about each topic.
All right, and we'll leave it up for another 30 seconds or so. Right now we got about 70% reporting. All right, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, we have some new folks, 36%, less than 5 years, and then we have the gambit across the board in the other direction as well. So we will try to adjust the content in both directions and address some things that we hope will be useful for those who have fewer than 5 years experience, as well as will hopefully be of interest to those who've been around for quite a while, 15 or more years. And so thank you all for joining us. The objectives today is to learn a bit about the academic records and transcript management as a profession, to give you some updates about the book on the topic and to discuss a bit about the many ACRO resources available to you to help you manage and understand and learn about the profession of academic records management and transcript management. And also again, to hear from Nora and Sue about their areas of responsibility, how that has moved through their career, and how COVID-19 in response to that has brought some changes to what they lead at their institutions. For those of you who aren't familiar, ACRO has a lot of resources, and this slide should have said some of the ACRO resources, but we have a lot because given our name, it doesn't surprise anyone, I don't think, that we have a lot of resources for registrars and those who also lead this field. So we have the transcript guide, which is the book that's available to you. If you don't already have that, that is really a go-to book for learning terminology, addressing current issues, as a guide to understand what should go in the transcript, what shouldn't, what should be in the database, how it's managed, all kinds of things. It really is the go-to book. All the versions I have are quite creased at the edge because I've used them so much. We also have the report that's based upon you responding to our survey on it. And we have professional proficiencies on the subject, as well as a comprehensive learner records standards now, because that's a new thing for academic records. So being a long-term project we've worked on, ACRO has. Guidance in the COVID-19 specifically about what institutions are doing about academic records and transcript and grading and everything else that we had to change so quickly. We also have a series of career profile reports that talk about how the registrars got where they are, where they came from, their personal stories and words of experience for those of you who are interested in possibly pursuing it. And I just listened to today's For the Record podcast. That's a podcast about registrars and various topics that's available to you, and additional research items on the ACRO Research page. So for those of you who have been in this field, you probably know that some out there think that academic records and transcript is like Stonehenge here. It's immovable, it's been there forever, and it's a mystery to many where it all came from. But that's not necessarily true. We also some may think that change in policy happens like this, very, very, very slowly. Of course, COVID-19 has proved to many that we can move as a entity, as an area of expertise quite quickly when it has to be done. And some may think that leading it in the roles that Sue and Nora and others are is like this, lather, rinse, and repeat. It's the same from year to year. We build to the schedule of classes, we post degrees, we change grades, we post grades. But it actually is not. It's a very complex environment for those of you who are new to this or considering taking on leadership roles. The registrar's office and the academic and records transcript function, whether it's called registrar's office or not, is really the hub of the wheel. What we do in higher education has to have this function, and it requires skilled leadership to manage well. It is something that you can learn, that you can talk with others about, and they can provide their wisdom and expertise of how they got where they were and how they work through things. And ACRO is a great resource for members to talk to each other about this. Normally that would occur at conferences in person a lot more often, but we've come up with ways where we can engage each other alternatively now. As I mentioned earlier, it's actually core to our proficiencies, professional proficiencies. The records and academic services in particular, and this is a screenshot from our website, and transfer and articulation. They have key areas where we believe everyone who's in this field should have some expertise in. It is a varied field, as I said earlier, and these are just some of the things that are involved with academic records management. So the computer information system, all of the compliance rules, both internally and externally, operations management, leading the folks who take care of these things, customer service, both internal customer service and external, data management, the development, modification, and involvement in academic policy and curriculum related to how it impacts the academic record, and of course, reporting and research. On the transcript side, transcript credit evaluation. So coming into the institution, again, customer service, systems management, which a lot of us have had to address systems management right now because we weren't necessarily prepared to switch to all remote work. Articulation agreements, data management and stewardship again, and reporting and research and compliance. So it is a very broad-based function. One of the things we do to help support our members in this function is complete an academic records and transcript guide survey. And as I've said earlier, thank you very much for those of you who participated in this survey. We had 728 this year who completed the entire survey. And it's the 4th iteration. We try to do it every few years to help support the changes and updates in the book. It serves as a standalone report, and it is available to anyone on the ACRO website with all the data in it. And it also serves as a basis for the practice recommendations in the book that our authors are going to talk about. From this last set of data, we found that there's a decrease in the number of institutions who are using the full Social Security number. And that's as it should be, because we know that you're not supposed to. It's a best practice not to include the full Social Security number on transcripts. So that number has been falling over the last decade. Some of the other key findings is we found that the topic of eligibility to re-enroll is only on 1 in 5 transcripts, but about half or more than half include probationary information. We had a differentiation on this survey asking about the difference between conferred and awarded dates and the degree completed date, because those dates can actually be different. And 13% of institutions go ahead and record both. And 98%, probably unsurprisingly, say that the person who signs their transcript is their registrar. Occasionally I get a question from folks saying our registrar is retiring, or they won the lottery and they left quickly. Who now needs to sign it until we hire a registrar? But it is most often the registrar. And this is a growing topic, but the last one, 72% of institutions do not collect a student's preferred pronoun. That is something that we get asked about, whether or not we're collecting that and how we're addressing it. And I think when we repeat this again in another few years, that number is going to decrease, as in the number of people who are collecting it will increase over time. For those of you who are not overly familiar with the book, while you're glancing at these updates for 2020, the regular content in this book that I think everybody who's in the registrar's office should have at least one copy of. It also covers legal issues, FERPA issues, again, what goes in the what is recommended to be recorded in the database, what's considered optional, how it should be recorded, how long it should be kept, what should go in the transcript key, name changes, gender changes, information, diploma reissuing, archival links. A whole bunch of resources are available in this book. It's pretty thin, but it's packed with a lot of material. And this year's update includes guidance on the notation of academic disciplinary actions, which is one of the items that we added this year. And I just noted there's not many who actually report that. And some new requirements for name change and gender change recommendations. The extended transcript, recording of co-curricular and extracurricular. So that kind of ties back to the competency-based education recording and the alternate ways of learning that we're now trying to record for students, so their whole record is available, not just the classroom experience. The diploma thing, reissuance has been updated, prior learning assessment, and also, unfortunately, what's probably going to become a more prevalent topic right now is number 7, records management when institutions close. I think that we are going to see a few more close, unfortunately, because of what is going on right now with COVID-19 and the reaction to that. So remember the iceberg I showed earlier, that changes, many think that changes don't happen particularly quickly, and that would be true. The iterations of the book A few things changed from 3 years apart to next one, but a lot of it really stayed the same. We also do grading practices survey, and we track that over time. A lot of that stayed the same. But COVID forced us, like this waterfall, to take a lot of information in very quickly, make very rapid adjustments in very broad areas. Grading, any number of things, pass, fail, transcript evaluation, and it impacted a large number of students. And if you were in a room seeing it, I bet you I could see that you would be nodding your heads with me in agreement and to this one. We did a few series of COVID-19 impact surveys, trying to get them out very quickly. They were only open for 2.5 business days, and then the results were shared with you that Friday. So they're open Monday, and they were out on that Friday. So we learned that transcript printing was a challenge for some. It was delayed by 43% of those were having a delay in printing transcripts because they were printing themselves. Some of them are having to go into campus even though campus is closed. Others are having to print them alternatively in their home office, which is an interesting thing because then you got to run to the post office and mail them. As a result of COVID, some are also, a good percentage, are considering how and what formats transcripts are accepted and how they are sent. This is probably put into the forefront for some colleges. Hey, we really need to look at some electronic solutions for test scores and transcripts, both inbound and outbound with our major partners. We also, they were considering changes to transcript credit evaluation. How do you count the pass-fail and other non-qualitative grades that people are changing this term? And what if those changes continue for the next term? And do we note any difference on the transcript? There's a ton of conversation on these things, and another resource for you are the coffee breaks that have been recorded on those subjects. So if you want to go back and hear what other panelists have said and what other Q&As were on the subject, we have both the reports and the coffee breaks to help you along. Now, not trying to make light of the situation with COVID-19. It is an extremely serious and unfortunate situation we're facing. Lots of people have had tragedies in their lives and facing issues in their lives across the board around this. But we can maybe try to say that this gives us an opportunity as academic records and transcript managers and leaders, and see it as a disruptor that allows us to take a look at what we're doing. And as this one says, dismantle norms and forge unimagined futures. So ways to think about surfacing students in a way that is maybe a bit more nimble than it has for some things, maybe allows our staff to work a little bit easier on things by doing a little bit more electronically. But again, I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but it might be an opportunity for us to reinvestigate our profession and make some changes now in a way that's faster than they might not have happened under other circumstances. So now we're going to spend about 30 minutes or so with the 6 questions that we came up with for the moderators, and we will of course address your questions as they come along as well after this. So I'd like to have Nora and Sue tell us a little bit about themselves and their institutions first before we start the first question.
Thanks, Wendy. This is Sue Hamilton. I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs at Rutgers University. I work in the Health Sciences Division of Rutgers. I have been, I hate to say this, or I'm surprised to say this, in the registrar profession for 30+ years now. I work at the, as I said, the Health Sciences Division of Rutgers, and that is not a geographic campus, but it is more discipline-based on the health professions disciplines. So our responsibilities cut across the entire state of New Jersey. We have a decentralized registrar staff so that each school or location has registrars specific to those students in those disciplines that are health sciences. So thank you.
And thank you, Sue. This is Nora McLaughlin. I am the registrar at Reed College. Reed College is a liberal arts institution in Portland, Oregon, of about 1,400, mostly undergraduate students. So a fairly traditional curriculum. And most of our students come from all over the country and in fact, in many parts of the world. So it was interesting in the COVID crisis to figure out how to deal with students and finding places for them who couldn't necessarily go home. So that's a little bit about READ.
Thank you, Sue and Nora. And a reminder to participants that if the questions that we're going to ask them, I'm going to ask them with the panelists, spark other questions for you, please put them in the Q&A section and we will address them. Okay. Our first question to Sue and Nora. As co-authors of the book, what key takeaways would you like to share with our participants today?
As we talked earlier, for us in editing the book, we found that the key takeaways on a broad brush approach are really that it's a very responsive book to current issues that are going on in the registrar profession. It's probably one of the more frequently edited guides that ACRO publishes, and part of that is to be responsive to timely issues. But it also is able to be a resource for registrar basics. Each of the chapters speaks to things that are timeless in that regard and are things that any registrar at any level or any type of institution needs to think about. So for me, the key takeaways are its timeliness, but also its basic timelessness.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with a few specifics. I think one of the things that Wendy mentioned earlier is how few of those surveyed are recording and using preferred pronouns. And that we see as something that we are recommending that people record and begin to use. It's deeply important to our students. It's complicated. Our faculty wanted to make sure they knew how to refer to students correctly. So I think that was one of the changes we saw. A robust discussion of disciplinary and academic actions on transcripts. The findings from ACRO's study of whether and how to record disciplinary actions were part of what we used to update the guide and say what we think is a good practice for institutions. This is something that varies broadly across institutions and is involved with institutional culture, but having recommendations in the guide about this that follow from the research that ACRO did was quite timely. And I think another area, this notion of the comprehensive learner record or the extended transcript. A number of institutions are looking at a broader definition of the transcript. There's the academic transcript, which is the traditional recording of courses students take and how they do in them. But this co and extracurricular work, competencies, those kinds of things that a student can elect to include with their academic transcript to give a broader sense of that student's experience at the institution, I think is a way that we can assist students as they move from our institutions out into the world. So those are some of the, I think, the key takeaways that I found us wrestling with and updating in the book.
Thank you, Sue and Nora. Appreciate your responses. So the next one, how, if at all, has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted how you lead the functions of the academic records and transcript area?
I like the "if at all" phrase. That's pretty amusing. It's affected a lot. And I suspect every one of you on this call has had to deal with this in ways that it was difficult or impossible to anticipate. But let me just talk a little bit with broad strokes. Learning to work remotely, and not just work remotely, but for those of us who are managing and mentoring staff, all of the complexities that go with that. I had a recent conversation with some colleagues here in Oregon about people who are having really good experiences with that and people who are really struggling with making sure people feel supported and mentored when they're working remotely. I think a second area is working more intently and intensely with partners both across the institution and outside the institution to solve problems and serve our constituents. Anything from closer work with the library, with computing, with, for us, with some offsite printing, a lot of forging collaborations that were enormously helpful to us to solve some of the problems that we had not expected to deal with. And then as a result, finding different and often better ways to do things, because we had to find different ways to do things, and it provides an opportunity to find a better path. And I'll let Sue talk a little bit more about specifics.
Thanks, Nora. I think all of those subject areas are important, and some of the things that I'll speak to regarding specifics, one overall consideration is how the relationships we have with our direct reports and our supervisors and our campus partners are becoming more prevalent and key to our ability to succeed. And on a normal day, relationships are important, but certainly in these times, the way we maintain our relationships with folks and have kept those relationships going sort of become more apparent when we're in a high need situation. So a couple of things we've talked about is, you know, we're telling folks to work from home, but do we know whether they have appropriate equipment? And I know many of us had to scramble to get laptops to staff that were compliant with our campus security needs or were just available to them because their home computers are being used by children or other family members. So we had to, you know, work on those relationships with IT. Was it a matter of borrowing them? Did we have to purchase them quickly? Did we go to our tech store and purchase laptops that might otherwise have been available to students to purchase? And all of the things that might be related to having a laptop at home and connectivity. One of the other things that has come to the fore in the COVID environment is supervising, as Nora said. Our job is to mentor as well as manage folks. And how do you do that remotely when you might have been in a practice of walking down the hall and checking in on people, popping in and seeing how things are going, where you can just feel the tenor of the room by being there in person. Now, many of us are relying on calendar applications like Outlook or others to see what folks are doing and asking them. I know myself, I ask my staff, be very particular about calendaring things that you're working on. So not just meetings, but other projects and things, so we can look back on these days and see where we spent most of our time. Are we asking folks to keep project logs of any kind that are shared with the rest of the office, so that if someone is unavailable or loses connectivity, we can, you know, tap into their Excel file that shows the latest information? Or are we using systems like Slack or other, you know, Microsoft Teams and other things that might enable us to stay connected? And then we did touch a little bit on it in an earlier question. What is our customer service platform, and how are we enabling our clients, students, and faculty to communicate with us in these days? Are we relying on electronic forms, or is this forcing us to think about, well, we should develop electronic forms because that would have made life easier for everyone in these times? And, you know, whether that includes electronic transcripts or other just forms where students can conduct business with our offices now that they can't walk in. And enabling those kinds of things to make work better.
Thank you. Thank you both. And as you both know, because you had a sneak preview, the follow-up question is, which of the changes that you just discussed, or even some that you didn't take the time to discuss, are going to remain in place when you return, and why?
Well, I know for us in our office, I've already had staff who've asked if they could remain working remotely. For some, they found it to be a much more productive way to work. And, you know, there's no reason to not consider that, as long as we can build in the metrics to track their work, and that they're able to interact with the people they need to interact with. Many of us have a lot of back office functions where we don't see students. So certainly it almost doesn't matter where those folks are. So those are some of the things that we might consider keeping in place for those of us that care about the planet and know that we all drive a lot to and from work. We know we've seen benefits in that arena too. So why not contribute to that? Similarly with electronic transcripts, electronic forms, those are all things that would have no reason to go away should we return to a more on-campus work environment, and keep that sort of environment going, even though many of us may be back on campus.
And then I would add, one of the things that we've struggled with at Reed is the add and drop forms in the first couple of weeks of classes, where we have a perfectly robust online registration function. And so I'm hoping to move to using that in the first couple of weeks of instruction, because even in the fall, we may find that, in fact, we're already finding some faculty want to teach remotely. We're going to have hybrid courses. So I think extending that and seeing if we can have faculty buy-in on that, because it's easier for them as well, would be one of the things we might be able to move forward with. A colleague here on the West Coast in a PACRO meeting, we were talking about what had been advocating for online faculty evaluations for years and had been given no support for that. And magically during this time of remote everything, was contacted and said, hey, do you think you could implement that? And she said, you bet I can. And so being able to take advantage of those kinds of moments to say, maybe this is a better way to do this. We collaborated with the library. All of our undergraduate students and our graduate students submit a thesis, and we always get a copy of that in paper that we look at, and then they submit 4 paper copies, and we move that all online. And I think we will continue some version of that in the future, because like Sue's argument about the planet, most people are fine reading things online and don't need to have 4 copies of a 70-page document to kill all the trees. We had to modify our degree audit system to allow for greater flexibility with credit, no credit grading, which was something that happened. We had 3 versions of what people could do with credit, no credit in about 4 weeks. But we relaxed the restrictions on that. And so we've needed to build that into our degree audit system. And I think this is causing the campus to look at, well, how do we use credit, no credit? And maybe there is a better place for that than we've had in the past. So those are some of our, changes that we're looking at either moving forward with or retaining, even when we get back to mostly on-campus work.
Thank you both. I actually have a follow-up question to this, and that's somewhat related to what Nora just said about having to change the degree audit system very quickly to accommodate credit, no credit. Can either of you, or would either of you like to address transfer students? So transcript evaluation, some of the students are coming in with pass or credit and no credit, but actually even your campus-based students. How is that, if at all, affecting your registration co-requisite and prerequisite rules? And how have you managed to change or adjust that, or have you had to as a result of having to change so quickly?
Well, the faculty at Reed agreed that if we were relaxing our credit, no credit for our students, that we would accept courses in the spring and likely then again in the fall that were graded credit, no credit from other institutions. It seemed only fair. So I think we are going to see this as a unique time and process those in a way. And then we will need to check and make sure that our prerequisite checkers are going to allow for that. We've certainly modified the degree audit. We're going to have to double check and make sure that those restrictions aren't going to prohibit somebody from moving forward in terms of registering for courses.
Thank you, Nora. Sue, do you want to add anything?
Sure. Across most of the Rutgers schools, we had a pass-fail option for students. Ordinarily, that would have been they would have been required to opt for that at the beginning of the term before they were, more than a week in. Obviously that was loosened and students were able to opt for that literally right up to the end of the term. And I think even some were approved after the term and students received a letter grade that was then changed to a pass grade or a no credit grade. So we've had conversations about that. We also have been having conversations about how this semester will impact their overall GPA and any possible graduation honors for those who are undergraduates. Whether this term is included at all, whether it's excluded completely, whether certain courses would be picked or chosen, or whether it's an entire semester or not. We've certainly had the same transfer credit conversations as Nora mentioned, that we shouldn't be more lenient with our students than we are with transfer students. So those considerations are going. And I think the benefit for us in the health sciences division is there was a lot of pass-fail anyway before. So in some cases, it may not be much of an impact at all.
Thank you. The responses you shared for the last two questions really reinforces for me what Sue, you shared as a description, and others have used it as well, that this unit, be it labeled the registrar's office or otherwise, is the hub of a lot of functions at the institution. And so you're engaged as leaders and your staff in functions that touch the students from the time they're first admitted, if they have transfer credit or AP credit or international baccalaureate, anything that has credit from the beginning, to when students actually leave the institution and beyond, when they're alumni. And I have tried to think about other units that have that breadth of responsibility and have not so far been able to come up with one that has it, that continues on and touches so many areas. So thank you for your leadership in the areas and for all those who on the webinar who are doing that work. The next question. What advice do you have for fellow academic records and transcript management professionals today? It's a very broad question, completely open to however you want to interpret it.
So I'll start with just a couple of things. The first is pay attention. Know what's happening across your campus, regionally, nationally, even internationally. It was enormously helpful to be able to look at some of the ACRO questions about how people were dealing with COVID on their campuses. I used one of the results when I was talking to our curriculum committee about pass-fail when we were dealing with changing, opening that up for our students. Reading campus news, reading committee minutes are good strategies as well. Engagement with ACRO is one, I think, very good curated way to assess the broader landscape. Chronicle of Higher Education, Inside Higher Education, those kinds of things. I think that's something that I didn't do enough of early in my career, and I think I have found the benefit of that in more recent times. So I would say pay attention. The second, and this is something that can be strategic, is make sure you're in the room when decisions are being made, or as the saying goes, make sure you're at the table, otherwise you may be on the menu. Even if you aren't a member of, say, a relevant committee, sit in on meetings to observe. It may not be long before your input is requested. So volunteering to serve on committees at your institution, volunteering to serve on committees with your regional and national associations. These are ways that you can be in the conversation when important decisions are being made. And once people understand what you have to offer, I think then you become someone who is valued for their opinion. So those are a couple of, those are two pieces of advice I would have.
Thanks, Nora. I think to continue that thread of where to be and how to be, it's important for all of us to be flexible. As we move through our careers, and we've been doing these things for many years, it's sometimes a byproduct that we become a little rigid and we think about things in the way we've always done it, or we've never done it that way. And it's important for us in any time, but in these times especially, to not be rigid about things and to be flexible about approaches, whether it's working from home or new forms or new technologies. I was on a call just yesterday with a colleague, and we both realized that we were the two oldest people on the call. And that's a tough place to be. And we have to rely on our staff who may be younger and come to us with different skills, and allow them to educate us on occasion and say that there might be a better, more efficient, more modern or technical way to do something, and not to just push those away because we don't know enough about it. The metaphor I use in my own experience is feeling like a dinosaur sometimes. And we're all exposed to new platforms and new ways of doing business, whether it's Slack that I mentioned before, or Microsoft Teams, or at Rutgers, we're introducing Salesforce. We all know about Outlook and OneDrive and Google Docs and all sorts of things that are new ways of doing our work and communicating. And those of us that may feel that this is too new or too different have to be willing to hear some input, and whether it's criticism or just feedback, constructively, I hope, from our colleagues, that there is a better way to do things, and be more interested in the results than maybe in the means to get to those results. And that these new technologies are really there to help us and to make us more efficient and effective, and not worry about abandoning old ways, because there was an old way before we got there, and there will be an old way after we move on and leave things potentially hopefully in a better place with these new systems.
Thank you both. We're at 11:41. We have a couple more questions here, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So where do you see the best opportunities for change in the next year in the area of academic records and transcript management and leadership?
I think we would all agree that these times are giving us information and ammunition to bring to our leadership for things that we might have talked about doing, but we never really had the wherewithal or the commitment to get them done. And e-transcripts is a great example. This environment will allow us to bring that advocacy forward and have a better argument to make that we will be more responsive to our students and to our internal colleagues if we can embrace these new resources and respond to emergent challenges, whether it's a pandemic or a volcano or an earthquake or a hurricane damage, that will be much more nimble if we prepare for these things in advance. So that's turning this disruption into an opportunity, which is a phrase my friend Nora taught me during this exercise.
And I would say one of the really important opportunities is additional collaboration. We had to find paths, and we worked with computing and the registrar, we are the registrar, the library, to solve some problems and find ways, because they had some expertise that we didn't. And in fact, I was just on a call with computing yesterday saying, yeah, this process that y'all are helping us with is just too slow for us to be able to change anything in the fall. And they said, no, wait, maybe we can. So I would say additional really collaborating with folks to help us do our work remotely and make sure our students and faculty are being served. We are looking at a different way of advising and registering our new students in light of what's happening right now, and trying to figure out how to bring students to campus safely. So that is something that we've been advocating, doing some measure of advising and registration over the summer for new students, and have gotten resistance on that for a number of years. And now the faculty are saying, I think we should advise and get the new students registered in the summer. And I'm going, what a great idea. So that's something that we may be able to move forward with in a way that helps our students feel more connected and ready for the fall semester. So those are a couple of ways. And I think the collaboration has extended with the faculty as well. They've seen that some of the old ways of doing things maybe aren't the best. And so helping them see that these new pathways are actually better for them as well. So those are a couple of areas.
Much appreciated. The last question sort of ties back to the previous one, the one 2 questions ago. They shared some recommendations for professionals in the field today, but this is specifically towards the participants today who have 5 years or less experience, or those who are trying to pursue or those who are trying to pursue leadership positions like yours. So what words of wisdom do you want to share with those pursuing a career like yours?
Sue, do you want to start on that one?
Sure, I can do that. I think the one thing that I like to remind folks of as they're coming up in the leadership chain is not to act alone on your campus if you can help it. It's tough to carry a new initiative forward all by yourself, even though you may have primary responsibility for a particular initiative, or it's an idea that is yours alone. Getting early adopters and cheerleaders to help advocate and amplify your message is going to be key in whether you succeed or fail. So you kind of know your campus, you know who your so-called friends are, your like-minded people. Talk to them, get them on board, let them vet out some of the problems with you so that when you go to the real folks who may give you some pushback, you're not standing there alone on the breach, and you can rely on those folks to help carry forward your message. I think one thing that virtually everyone I've met in my years in this profession and my years involved with ACRO is it's a very collaborative, very open and welcoming community. And whether you can find resources on campus or off campus, you go better when you're with friends and with colleagues than when you're trying to advocate on your own.
And I'd follow up on that. I'm going to say very similar things. Listen carefully to one another. You can always learn more about another person's position, even if you don't agree with it. And I find myself, that's something a lesson I still keep trying to teach myself, is when somebody broaches a topic and seems to be in a completely different space than I am, I really need to listen because there's going to be something in there where we can make a connection. And as Sue said, build alliances across your institution from the very start. Asking questions is a really good way to encourage colleagues, faculty and staff, and students to tell their stories. And you'll learn a lot about the culture of an institution from the stories. Remember asking a senior faculty member a question I knew the answer to, but I wanted to hear him tell me why a certain thing was done a certain way, and it really helped me understand that part of the culture. And then finally, and this is echoing again what Sue said, find pals in the profession that you can call and say, what do I do with this idea on my campus? They can provide perspective, humor, which always helps me, and help you be more effective. So having those folks, either it's nearby institutions or like institutions, people that you can call and ask, I think always helps.
Thank you both. Appreciate you. We have, I realized I said the time zone that I'm in, which is Arizona earlier. So I'm just going to say we have 12 minutes left, and we have a question that a few folks have thumbed up on and saying they want the answers to it as well. So we'll move on to the Q&A, audience Q&A phase. So since there's just the one, I'll go ahead and take that on. We currently, which actually has multiple parts, we currently list transfer credits as a summary of earned credits by institution. We have had student complaints that not listing out each transferred course is giving them problems when they apply for licensure exams. Do others have these problems? And if you do list out each transfer course, how do you handle titles of courses for which you do not have direct equivalencies? So Sue or Nora, would either or both of you like to answer that? Again, do you have these problems if you block transfer? And if you do list out each course, how do you handle the titles?
I'd say that we use block transfer. I have not heard of this as a problem from students. I don't have programs that lead to licensure very much, so that may be part of it, but my belief has always been that what we're saying on our transcript is these are the courses we've applied to our degree. It doesn't necessarily mean these are all the courses they took from that institution and I'm assuming they're going to need to provide transcripts from that institution. So I am a block transfer person. So I am not of great help with this, except that I've not found it to be a problem for my students.
Sue?
And from our perspective, we do a little bit of both. We have those programs where block transfer credits are assigned on our transcript. And as Nora mentioned, we rely on the sending institution to provide the detail. And we tell students, if you need the detail, you need to request a transcript from the prior institution and from us to get the full scope of what courses you've taken and what grades you've earned. However, we do have programs where block credits don't work because we need those course specifics to apply to our degree audit system. So we do have to break down each of the courses. We make it easier on our staff by not bringing in grades. We just bring in those courses that were passed and put them on the transcript. We use Banner, so we're able to just label things as transfer credit or borrow course numbers without getting specific about titles to make them apply to our degree audit system. So it kind of, I guess it's an all and more kind of answer, that we do whatever we can to make it best for our students. But we do refer them back to their sending institution if they need specifics and we don't have it.
And if I could clarify, I just looked at the chat. When I say block transfer, we do bring in course by course transfer because of degree audit and all that sort of thing. So I know what we've taken in from an institution. But what I show on the official transcript that goes out to other institutions is simply a summary by school, by transfer institution of that credit. So I've taken it in individually, but what I display on my on the Reed College transcript is summary information, just to be clear.
Thank you both. Go ahead, Laura. Go ahead, Sue.
I was gonna say, that's interesting. I didn't know that there was a system that could do that. That's kind of neat.
It's almost, for me, like this question was planted because, and I say that because you guys addressed it both ways, from the transfer in, transfer out. How do you do with your degree audit, and what are the rules are with evaluating? There is a survey about to go out to our primary contacts at the end of this month from Serve undergraduate students that talks about both stranded credits, what processes in place don't let students have access to their official transcripts, and also what are the nuances in policy and process around advising and transcript evaluation processes for transfer students that impact all of these things, like licensures. How do other people see the transcripts? So thank you for Marley for asking that question, for allowing me to put a little plug in for the survey that our primary contacts are about to get, and for Sue and Nora to tie that together, because it is a topic that gets quite complex quickly when we receive transcripts from multiple types of institutions and how we record that internally at our institutions. So with that, we have about 5 minutes left, but I want to say thank you everyone for participating today, for staying on board. And we have a bunch of resources again that are listed earlier. This is not exhaustive. These are available to everyone, and hope you find them useful. And I very much appreciate your time today. Sue and Nora, would you like to say anything before we sign off?
I was busy typing in the chat.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think questions are always good. That's one of my, that's what I was about to type, but no, thanks. It was really interesting to prepare this and to think about these things and to be able to look retrospectively at spring and how we had to make lots of decisions and how we're making them even now moving forward. So it was helpful.
Sue?
And I'd just like to say thank you also for being invited to participate here and to put in a plug for ACRO. I know the calls go out for editors and writers and contributors to webinars, and I would encourage all those who are listening, even if you think you're too junior to participate or to contribute, you're not. This is a collaborative effort, and I look forward to hearing some new voices and new names and faces going forward.
Well said, Sue.
Thank you. We also have a related webinar coming up in a couple weeks on change management. Some of you may have participated in that survey a while back on change management in higher education. Learn some very interesting things about what makes things work well for change management and what are some challenges around it, especially around technology. And in light of what COVID has done, which is again, forced a lot of change very quickly, thought that webinar might be of interest to some of you. So that's available, and it is in a couple of weeks at the end of the month here. And we'll show the results and have panelists there as well who have led change on their campus. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, and take care.